Welcome back, everybody. Today is going to be my complete set presentation for December of 2022. This one was a request from a viewer. I asked in my previous video, which sets would you like to potentially see from the 70s and 80s? And I was given 1977 as the chosen year to be able to present. So this is going to be the 1977 top set. The 1977 top set consists of 660 cards and has 2 Hall of Famers and potentially a third if someone gets voted in at this upcoming Winters meetings that's going to be happening later on this week in December. So I guess hope everyone's having a great time so far this early holiday season and early week. The World Cup continues on. The United States is unfortunately out, but there's still a lot of great soccer to watch. And of course, you have the NFL. It's been a rough weekend for me with the teams I root for because unfortunately the United States lost and then the Bears lost to the Packers yet again today. But we'll stick on baseball for this. All right, so let's jump into the 1977 top set. The 1977 top set starts with the league leader cards from 1976 and has both the leaders from the American League and the National League featured on the same card as they did throughout the decade. In this first one, we have a ton of Hall of Famers that are going to be on the first page, starting with George Brett up here in the corner with Bill Madlock, who's not a Hall of Famer, but definitely a very good player. We have Mike Schmidt, the home run leader, here with the Philadelphia Phillies for 1976. In here, we also have Jim Palmer, which is going to be the league leader in victories for the American League. We also have the actual MVP from that season also featured in here for 1977, which was George Foster. He was the National League Most Valuable Player along with Rod Carew for the American League. We also have, I believe he's also featured on here. Maybe he's not. I thought he was for a minute, but we'll get to him in a minute. We have the league leaders for strikeout leaders of Tom Seaver and Nolan Ryan on the same card, previous teammates with the Mets, of course. And then the rookie phenom from the 1976 season is featured in there, which is Mark Fidrich, a player that is known more just as a sort of a legend at this point, as opposed to someone that was a Hall of Famer, but he was quite the phenom at the time he came about. All right, so you can see the basic design is down here of the 1977 Topps cards, white borders, simple image in front. We have kind of a little banner here that says what position they play. And then we have the team lettering right at top, followed by their names below. And the names and colors tend to also match their teams. All right, but not exclusively. So starting right at the top quarter here, we have Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson obviously was famous that season for the 3 home runs he had in 3 pitches that helped win the 1977 World Series over the Los Angeles Dodgers. The other playoff teams that were featured that season were the Philadelphia Phillies, who did not advance because the Dodgers did, and also the Kansas City Royals, who were eliminated by the New York Yankees, despite having a better record at that time. Same thing was for the Phillies as well. They had a better regular season record, but did not advance to the World Series. The number 1 draft pick that year, actually, oddly enough, was Harold Baines. All right, so let's point out some other Hall of Famers as we kind of go through the cards. We have Frank Robinson down here in the corner. You can see he's the Hall of Fame manager featured on the Indians card. At that time, he was fully retired as a baseball player. Bill Freehan, who's not a Hall of Famer, but a very famous Tiger nearing the end of his career in that one. Dwight Evans, someone that's gotten some Hall of Fame consideration over the years. We got Bill Buckner with the big, bushy mustache and also eyebrows in this picture. I love some of the pictures from the 70s because the hair really was allowed to just kind of live free at that point. And you have these big, bright colors like these Houston Astros uniforms, like right here. And the Milwaukee Brewers, for example. Just it's a very telling set in a way because it really captures the 1970s. All right. Let's see if they were an all-star. They didn't have a separate all-star card. It would list an NL all-star below in their pictures for the cards that for people that were all-stars from the 1976 season. It's always weird to see Bobby Mercer in any other uniform than a Yankee, in my mind. And I'll point out the 2 rookies when you get to them. One of them is going to be a dual rookie card. It's got several other players listed on it, where the other one's going to be a standalone one. It's a pretty easy set to be able to complete. You can find one and put it together. You can either find one or put it together relatively cheaply, which is not the case for the earlier 70s. This kind of is the case pretty much from the late 70s going forward, where you can find these sets pretty easily, whether they're already completed or you can find good lots at decent prices where you're able to kind of put that set together yourself. Here we have Jim Rice up here in the middle, Hall of Fame outfielder for the Red Sox. Johnny Bench down here in the corner. For me, these are a lot of familiar names that I watched as a kid. I was actually born in 77, so a lot of these guys were just coming up at this time and actually were featured in a lot of the cards that I later got in the 80s. So unlike some of the other sets that I showed you previously, where maybe some of these guys were at the tail end of their career, but it was very few of them, a lot of these are guys that I actually got a chance to watch. I have a few players that are ending their careers right around this time. I believe Brooks Robinson being one of them when we get to it. Pinnell, who might get in as a manager at some point. Joe Morgan up here in the corner. Your Cy Young Award winners for this year were Steve Carlton and Sparky Lyle, even though we haven't had a chance to be able to see those yet. Oh, here's Steve Carlton, one of the two as I just mentioned. It's probably the happiest he's looked in many of the photos I've seen of him. It's a very stoic looking picture in a lot of his cards. Look at those Indians uniforms back there. Man, that's quite a red uniform. Here we got Rod Crew, as we mentioned earlier, who was the MVP for this season. Now, your rookies of the year, one of them is featured in the set. The other one is not. I'll mention that one when I get to it, but the one that's not featured is Eddie Murray. His rookie card's actually in 1978. But he is the rookie pitcher, rookie of the year for that season in 1977. Mike Schmidt right here in the middle. Here's our first Hall of Fame rookie of the two we have. Recently passed Bruce Sutter with the Cubs here. Pretty famous for both the Cubs and Cardinals. He might pitch for a few other teams at the end of his career. Oh, as I mentioned, I forgot to mention the backs of the cards, even though we're kind of just about 100 cards into the set. Green card stock, as with a lot of them during the 1970s. Big lettering for their names, and you have the full stat line on the back with a little cartoon, as is pretty characteristic of most Topps cards throughout the eras of Topps. Maybe a little fact or a little quiz that's on here for most of them. But for the most part, it's just a very basic card design that you see on most of the backs through the late 70s. You have Dusty Baker up here at the top. Hopefully he'll get in as a manager at some point, especially now he's got has a World Series victory to his name. Tom Seaver. Gaylord Perry, who also just passed. Wow, Sutter and Perry, the last two to pass, are just back-to-back here on two back-to-back pages. Got the Rookie Cup cards in these. We got Gary Templeton. Thurman Munson, someone I think at some point will get in the Hall of Fame. I think that's a very good looking card of his. These White Sox uniforms are terrible. I'm a White Sox fan, but this is the era when I'm like, wow, what were they doing with their uniforms? You know, there's a lot of bad uniforms during this era, but they're kind of fun when you look back at it historically. But these were pretty bad, even though they were modeled off an older uniform back in the early 1900s. It was a modern take on those uniforms, but they're not good. My White Sox actually won 90 games this season, but fell short of the playoffs. At this point, you had to win your division to get in. There was no wild cards. They may have been able to get it done in under the current playoff format, but that obviously didn't exist until just past season. Boog Powell near the end of his career. Fred Lynn up here in the corner, not a Hall of Famer, but quite a popular player during the early parts of the 80s and the late parts of the 70s. I'd like for him to get some consideration maybe through the Veterans Committee in the future, personally. We got record breakers featured now. We have a couple Hall of Famers that are featured here during this one. We have George Brett. This time he was being featured for most consecutive games with 3 or more hits at that point. The oldest player to be able to hit safely, Minnie Minoso. Now a Hall of Famer, as we know. Nolan Ryan, most seasons of 300 or more strikeouts. Bill Madlock was a good hitter, man. Louis Tiant was a great pitcher, too. Not a Hall of Famer, but maybe would get some reconsideration at some point in the future. J.R. Richard, man, he was quite the flamethrower during his period of time when he was in the league, but then had an arm injury, I think, or a head injury, I think it was, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Feel free to correct me in the comments if you remember why, but there was something that actually just kind of derailed his career, and he was never the same. There's that Mark Fidrich card again, very popular card from the set. There's a Cobra, Dave Parker. Not a Hall of Famer, but one that a lot of people feel he should be. Here we have our championship cards showing which teams won the championship for that season. In 76, it was a matchup between the Yankees and the Reds. Jim Catfish Hunter up here in the corner. Sparky Anderson, Hall of Fame manager. Brooks Robinson, featured in the corner here. Might have been one of the few guys that his rookie card in the 50s that was still playing by this point. I don't know for sure, but I think that might actually be the case. Gary Carter, Hall of Fame catcher down here. Good old Larry Boa. Man, he was a tough ball player. Don Zimmer, a lifer. At some point, I hope some people would put him in the Hall of Fame, but he was a coach, not really he was a manager a lot too, but spent a lot of time coaching, just was in baseball for years, wasn't a great player, but played for a long time. I don't know, just like to see a place for people like that. My generation remembers a lot for him being thrown to the ground by Pedro Martinez during a brawl between the Yankees and the Red Sox. Yeah, that was kind of crazy. I think that was 03 playoffs. You got Goose Gossage before he was moved on to the Yankees and before he grew that famous mustache of his. King Griffey Jr.'s dad, King Griffey. George Foster, as I mentioned, the MVP for this season. Lou Brock. Tim Carver near the end of his career. Buddy Herzog, Hall of Fame manager for the Royals before he moved over to the St. Louis Cardinals, where he became famous. Although he had a lot of great teams with the Royals during the late 70s, too. There's Billy Martin, manager of the Yankees at that time. Dave Winfield up here in the corner. When I was a kid, I really loved the cards from the late 70s. I think I was just fascinated with them because of the colors, the names, because it was stuff I couldn't just buy in the store. I was always interested in trying to get some of the older sets because I just loved some of the old designs and wanted to have cards from those sets. It'd be great if I got a star, but it was also kind of cool just to have a card from those sets. I still feel that way about a lot of the super rare vintage sets. Great if I have a Hall of Famer, but if I don't, it's nice just to have a card from some of those sets. We have Steve Garvey. Man, he needs to be reconsidered for the Hall of Fame, man. The voters haven't put him in, and the Veteran Committee hasn't put him in, but man, he was great during that time frame. We have the World Series. 1976. Cincinnati won its second in a row. Kind of featured here in just a few cards. Not quite as elaborate as some of the World Series cards you see from the 60s and early 70s. They kind of just start to dwindle away a little bit. They do come back later on in a lot of Topps issues. But like for the parts of the late 70s into the 80s, they started to kind of become obsolete. We have Bob Lemon, Hall of Fame manager with the White Sox, or Hall of Fame pitcher as a manager with the White Sox. I always thought that's kind of interesting. Nice looking Rusty Staub card there. Joe Torre, near the end of his career as a player. Hall of Fame manager. Ferguson Jenkins with the Red Sox. That kind of looks funny to me, being here from Chicago. Now we have our turn back the clock cards. This is the first time Topps did this with inset, where it kind of featured turn back the clock players. A couple Hall of Famers featured here. We have Carly Yastrzemski, the Triple Crown winner 10 years ago. At that time, I don't think they realized how long it would be until there was another Hall of Famer, but it was featured there. He was still an active player at that point. Ralph Kiner, he's in now for 7th straight year with home runs. A great Hall of Famer. I just got his rookie card not too long ago. Featured here on this channel. Pete Rose, not a Hall of Famer as we know. The infamous Pete Rose, but also someone that should be in the Hall of Fame. Still have a lot of airbrushing during this era. That's an airbrushed angel hat there for Don Baylor. I can't remember when the Blue Jays started. I think it was right around this time where the Mariners and Blue Jays kind of entered into the league. So we do see Mariners and Blue Jays cards. I don't think they're featured in 76. I think this is the first season you do see them. Really, Pop Stargell, I almost missed him before I turned the page. Ted Simmons, now a Hall of Famer. All right, so we got our first Hall of Fame rookie card in here, our second, I should say. And it's right here, featured right here. We have Andre Dawson, the Hawk, the NL Rookie of the Year. Quite the seasons with the Cubs when I was a kid. That was a lot of fun to watch, even though I wasn't a Cubs fan. I enjoyed watching him. And down here, I hope that Dale Murphy can get some reconsideration this week. This is the guy I mentioned for the Veterans Committee. He's on the ballot for the Veterans Committee to review. I hope they give him some serious consideration. Carly Yastrzemski. More rookie cards. There's a few names of note when you go through here. You got like Lee Mazzilli, Jack Clark, as is the case with a lot of them, but none of the guys actually were Hall of Fame players, but guys that definitely had an impact on the game, like Dennis Martinez threw a perfect game once. We have Dave Kingman, quite the home run hitter. Man, the modern day sabermetrics guys would love Dave Kingman. He definitely was a 3-outcome guy, for sure. Tommy Sutter, Hall of Fame manager. One of my favorite all-time names, Bake McBride. And we got 2 here. We have Raleigh Fingers, now with the Padres. Dennis Eckersley, still with the Indians at that point. Hall of Fame relief pitchers. Well, he was also a starter for a period of time. Earl Weaver, Hall of Fame manager for the Orioles. Willie McCovey, still with the Giants at this point, before he got moved on. Actually may have come back to the Giants at that point. I stand corrected. Dave Concepcion, very good shortstop in his own right. Barry's dad, Bobby. George Brett. I always love that George Brett card. I like the early career cards for George. Biff Pocoroba, another fun name from the era. Here we got Seattle Mariners, founded in 1976. Now on this we also have Jim Palmer, Sparky Lyle, actually the 2 Cy Young Award winners. Actually, Cy Young Award winner for this 1977 season. I think he was the 76 Cy Young Award winner, if I'm not mistaken. Got that all messed up. I love the airbrushed helmets there for the Mariners. Man, how do you not love Jose Cardinal cards from the 70s, man? That is so cool. His hat doesn't even fit his head. Phil Niekro, Hall of Fame pitcher. Don Sutton, Hall of Fame pitcher. Burt Bryleven, Hall of Fame pitcher down here in the corner. We have a card featuring Big League Brothers. Guys that actually were brothers. We have George Brett. The Niekros are not featured, and I'm not sure why. Maybe Joe Niekro was not in baseball at this point. Phil definitely was. Jim Cott, now a Hall of Famer. Carlton Fisk, a little action photo up here in the corner. It's a pretty cool looking card. Dick Williams, Hall of Fame manager. Getting near the end, guys. 2 pages to go. Nolan Ryan, one of the more popular cards from the set, as with any cards featuring Nolan Ryan from the 1970s. Tony Perez, Hall of Fame first baseman. And he ends with Willie Horton. That's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something new about 1977 Topps or the 1977 baseball season. You guys have a wonderful week. This is my last complete set presentation for the year. So we'll be doing our next one in 2023, but I'm not signing off for the month yet. Do have more content to come, so I look forward to being out there with you guys in the future. Have a great week.